What about real peace in the Middle East? Would that solve it? Nobody spoke about real peace.
Real peace, of course.
You know, I'm tired for 60 years, over 60 years of the area being unstable. So somebody, if both sides are serious about proposing real peace, then we will not have big issue. And also, I don't want Iraq and Iran to be the same. President Bush spoke, he was misguided us about weapons of mass destruction, and all of a sudden there's no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and here's a quagmire. Same thing. And you know, today's enemies are yesterday's best friends. You have Egypt, Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia gave money and arms to the Taliban. And the more you read about it, it's a war of oil and greed. You know, how come like Pakistan or other Malaysia or whatever other Islamic countries have democracy except Arab Islams in the Middle East? Because you have kings and emirates and all this, and it's not a democracy. How come there's Islamic democracy other places in the world?
But if I may, I agree with you. You know, I hope there'll be peace in the Middle East soon. But I think, from my perspective, that there's some people, important people like Brzezinski and other people that are saying, you know, freeze the settlements and this will take away the jihadist movement. This is, to my perspective, there's little appreciation for what the jihadist movement is and what it's about. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is if you want peace in the Middle East, if you weaken Iran, then maybe Hamas and Hezbollah are also weakened. Maybe there's a possibility for a real peace between Israelis and Palestinians. If the Iranians are allowed to control Gaza and Lebanon, and you know, if the Israelis pull out of the West Bank, how long does Fatah stay in power in the West Bank? It's a question. What will happen there? Hamas can control there. What, I mean...
Well, the parties have to come to the serious discussion, come down to the table and discuss real serious peace.
Although your comments are very intelligent insofar as the peace process will or should have a ripple effect in the region. I mean, there's this author, Ken Pollack, who wrote a book called Threatening Storm about why we should invade Iraq, and then another book, The Persian Puzzle, of why we shouldn't invade Iraq. And in it, he outlines a lot of the strategic preferences of countries and says that without Iran, there still will be a Hezbollah and there still will be a Hamas. Iran did not create them. Iran now is part of this triangle and support because of the changing nature of Revolutionary Guards. But if you want to talk about the strategic interests, it was in Israel's best interest for Hamas to be created as a counter to the PLO, and everybody talks about that as a historic problem. So I'm not sure it'll get rid of the big crisis in the region, but I think it's a start in relieving people of that excuse, that jihadist excuse or that terrorist excuse that everybody's against Israel, and if we get rid of Israel, we'll solve the problem. But studies show that countries that do business with each other tend to fight each other less. And so I think as a way to sort of end this, I think a peaceful solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict is perhaps one of the initial steps that will have a ripple effect of cooperation across the region.
It is an initial step, though. I mean, I think for those people that try to sell that as the beginning and end of the problems in the Middle East are understating the historical antagonism towards whether it be specifically the Jewish people or the other, right? As you talked about, whoever that is. In my recent sort of diplomatic trip over there, it was remarkable how every problem in the Middle East, when you were in Egypt and Turkey especially, was traced back to Israel. And that was unconnected at some level to the Palestinian-Israeli problem. There was a much broader critique there that will exist beyond I think that is a very big piece. Yeah. And so there's certain elements in Israel that will sort of say, no, that has nothing to do with it. It has a big piece to do with it, I think.
If I may, just from my perspective, a key, there's basically 4 stages, I can say, of anti-Semitism. There was sort of Christian European anti-Semitism. There was racial anti-Semitism. There was nationalist anti-Semitism. And now I think, in a sense, that anti-Semitism is focused on Israel, delegitimization, demonization of Israel. That's beyond criticism that Israel ought to deserve. And you can, just because you criticize Israel does not mean you're anti-Semitic. But I mean to delegitimize and demonize and want to destroy Israel. This is, to me, a form of contemporary anti-Semitism. All the anti-Semitisms are quite different, but what's remarkable, there's one thing that's the same. If the Jews would have accepted the Messiah and accepted Christianity, the world would have been saved. If the Jewish race would leave Europe, the European white Aryan race would have been saved. Today, people are saying, if only Israel would disappear, or if only Israel would do this or do that, the region and the world would be saved. This tracing back that you speak about is unfortunately giving me a lot of work in my center, because this is, tragically, the hijacking of serious, real problems and putting it into a genocidal form of anti-Semitism. This is anti-Semitism.
Listen, we're going to give the library back to the library.